Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for motion for the Mayor.
Please remain standing for
Let us pray. At the end of a busy day, with 2 meetings to come, pray for wisdom, focus and clarity. Pray that those who are responsible for making decisions which will impact the lives of those who live and work in Basingstoke and Deane are mindful of the responsibility they bear and the trust that's been given to them by the people of Basingstoke. Pray that decisions that are made tonight will benefit all in this community, those who have power and those who do not. Pray that the ego and party ambition that characterise the political animal in the public imagination will have no place in this building tonight. As we approach Easter and the coming of spring, pray for a blooming of care and love for the people of this place, its town and all its outlying villages. Amen.
Good evening, members. If the fire alarm should sound tonight, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of the council chamber. The exit for those of you at the back will be through the back stairs out into War Memorial Park. This end of the chamber, the stairs by the lifts, and take the door onto New Road and then walk round into War Memorial Park. We'll now move to the agenda for the extraordinary meeting. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Mrs Cubitt. Are there any other apologies? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Cherritt and Councillor Marks.
Councillor James.
Apologies, Mr Mayor, from Councillor Hussey, also Councillor Dunlop, but Councillor Dunlop should be here for the actual meeting.
Councillor Laura James. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there are there any now? No, thank you. Questions from members of the public? Councillor Potter.
Assuming my mic's working this evening, I don't know. I've got a point of order, Mr Mayor, which I'd like you to consider, and it will be the first of a number, by the way. On this particular matter, if I may, Mr Mayor, I know you and I have exchanged correspondence, but I want to make a comment about the public speaking element this evening. Looking at the Constitution at paragraph 3.2 on page 88, where it clearly states that the business to be conducted at an extraordinary meeting shall be restricted to the items of business contained in the request for that meeting, and there shall be no consideration of previous minutes or reports from committees, etc. I therefore find it difficult, Mr Mayor, to understand why you have allowed a political candidate at the forthcoming elections to attempt to hijack your meeting for his own short-term political gain. If you insist on allowing this candidate to further his political career at residents' expense, could you at least encourage the Leader of the Council to give a written answer to the planted questions of the Conservative candidate for Winklebury? I make the added point, if I may, Mr Mayor, we are all competing in Winklebury in the local elections. All of us could have presented our candidates here this evening, but out of respect for you and this extraordinary meeting, we chose not to. That obviously doesn't apply to all parties. But I ask for you to rule on that matter if you are able, or at the very least seek to influence the Leader of the Council in the way he responds. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Potter, and thank you for your email on the subject. As this is a public meeting, then public participation is in order. And I thank you for your restraint. Any member of the public is entitled to raise a question. So, as this is a question relevant to the motion, I have allowed it. I will now move to the question. Please, Mr. Smith.
Stand up. Would the Leader agree with me that the development of Manydown provides an opportunity for this Borough Council to define itself? An opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the past and show Basingstoke is an attractive, exciting place to live with a bright and prosperous future ahead, not a hotbed of political dogma. Would the Leader agree that making Manydown one of the highest quality developments in the south of England with an appropriate housing mix will benefit not just those moving to the new development, but also the town as a whole? And would he agree that the recent government investment in Manydown demonstrates this administration's commitment to ensure the infrastructure needs of the new development and the neighbouring communities are met?
Quiet. Quiet. Thank you for the question. I will now refer to the Leader for an answer which I hope will be equally as brief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall endeavour to be as brief as I possibly can, but I do believe this is a serious subject that should be treated seriously. The subject of Manydown will be with us for many years to come. We are planning for the long-term future, just not for today's needs. Its development will straddle at least 2 local plan periods, stretching well into the 2030s and beyond. It will add a new community of substantial proportions, which will create its own challenges. It will also have a significant effect on the surrounding communities that already exist. We have to come to terms with the need for growth to accommodate our expanding population. An expansion caused in part by an increasing birth rate in the borough, but mainly because most of us, very laudably, are refusing to die. An ageing as well as an increasing population brings its own challenges for the type and quantity of accommodation required in the future, as well as the services and infrastructure which will be needed. So in looking at Manydown, we have a tremendous opportunity, but also a very strong imperative to ensure that what is developed will meet the needs of future generations. That means we have to create communities that are both balanced and integrated. They must be sustainable both in the provision of necessary facilities and infrastructure, and also in terms of their impact on the environment. They must also contribute to the quality of life for the neighbouring communities that exist already, not detract from it. Above all, they must be places where people really want to live, where they can take pride in their environment, and where tomorrow's residents and those that will follow will want to call home. The decisions that we make now are vital to those aspirations. We cannot do everything alone. No council on its own has the knowledge and skills or the resources to carry out a development of this size, but neither will we obtain the outcomes that we seek if we just parcel up the land and sell it off to the highest bidder. We will need partners and we will need financial support. So yes, I am pleased that the government has recognised the need for support in developing the way forward by the award in the budget of £850,000 development funding, and in so doing has also recognised the future need for further financial assistance. There is also a clear recognition of the key role that the borough can play in creating sustainable economic growth in the south of England, which can only bring prosperity to our area for our residents' benefit. And yes, I do agree with the questioner, and I think actually the whole chamber should also be able to unite with me in agreeing that with Manydown we have the opportunity to do something special that embraces the needs of all of our community, that embodies the very best of design and the latest technology, and which will contribute significantly to the well-being of the borough for years to come. Our children and our children's children will not forgive us if we fail to meet that challenge. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you're entitled to a supplementary. Thank you. We will then move on to item 4, the affordable housing on Manydown. Mover Paul Harvey. Councillor Potter, point of order.
If I may, I warned you, obviously. I've got 2 points of order that relate to what we're now going to go into. And I think I'd like to raise them both together. I'm sure your legal experts on the right can give you a response to both. There's been a fair amount of exchange of emails again, some of which have come from me, obviously, in regard to the primacy of council in this matter. And I still maintain the view, as I will throughout the evening, obviously, that it should be a council decision in regard to the motion that's before us this evening, and this cannot and should not be delegated to the Manydown Executive Committee. I won't do all the stuff that's in the emails because I have sought to provide that to all members of council. That's the first point of order. I also want to raise, if I may, another matter which I know will fall before us when it comes to the main meeting later on. But within that main meeting, we will be looking at the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 17th of March 2015. And at that meeting, it is clearly recorded that Councillor Joe Warden had declared an interest on behalf of the members of the Manydown Executive Committee, namely himself, Councillor Isaac and Councillor Ossleton, regarding item 7 of the agenda, and that obviously relates, as we know, and we'll discuss it later on, to the local plan, and Manydown featuring within that local plan. I would expect, of course, that those same councillors will declare that same interest tonight when we get to that part of the meeting dealing with the minutes of the Cabinet. But I also go on to raise the point, and I think this is significant, that those same councillors, Jay Wardener, Isaac and Ossleton, are effectively here tonight representing the landowning interests of the council, and I believe in that capacity have an interest in the debate this evening regarding Manydown and the 40% affordable housing, and quite frankly should withdraw and not take part in the debate that is now to face us. And I think it's a very important issue. If that declaration of interest at Cabinet was appropriate, it's appropriate this evening as well, Mr. Mayor, and I ask for a ruling on that.
It's entirely their decision whether they declare or not. I'm getting advice here. We're just checking something over here, but it does appear that for full council meetings, dispensations have already been given. Passing to the Acting Chief Executive.
Mr. Mayor, we're just trying to find the correct paragraph in the Constitution, but in the Constitution there is a particular paragraph that talks about the local plan when it comes to council, and makes it clear that all members, regardless of whether they are a member of MEC or not, can take part once it actually comes to full council. But if you could bear with us, we'll actually find the correct paragraph and give you chapter and verse.
If we could proceed, I will ask Councillor Harvey to present the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In presenting this evening, one of the key questions we're asking is, what are we going to build on Manydown? For whom? By whom? And to whose master plan? These are the fundamental questions of public interest that bring us to this council chamber this evening. And we know of the needs of the people of our town for housing that they can afford and for infrastructure for the people of Winklebury and the west of Basingstoke. That should be our focus. There are those who see Manydown first and foremost as a cash cow, something to maximise profit. But profit for who is a really important question. 20 years ago, this council, then a Tory council, made a promise that if people voted to sell their council houses, then the money raised would be reinvested in new, affordable, low-cost housing. Many of those same people today own their homes. Many are living in housing association homes. And they need homes for their children and homes that they can downsize into. They bought Manydown. They bought Manydown with this council's taxpayers' money. The High Court judge ruled and affirmed that Manydown was bought for the good planning of the area, and he specifically referenced the provision of low-cost housing. Now, we know that it's key to honour those agreements and those trust. And whether or not we do that is a real judgment before us this evening and the purpose for why we are in this chamber. Or are we here really to serve the self-interests of others? And I don't mean the people of Basingstoke, I mean commitments being undermined in the tune of private interests and other interests that are not in this chamber that we do need to be very wary of. What we say is that Manydown can be something which can and should be proud of, a legacy that delivers the homes local people desperately need. From Kempshott to Hatchwarren, from Popley to Chinham, housing need in our town is real. It is tangible. People live with it day in, day out. So 40% affordable housing is not just achievable on land that we own and control. It's not just the right decision for all those people in need of housing in our town that is within their reach. It's all right to say you're going to build houses, but those houses have to be within the reach of people. And what is built and how it is built, for whom and by whom, is a huge question. It's also a moral question. It's a moral question of, does the council hear their needs? Does the council understand the issues? Does the council respect the needs of residents in Winklebury on the west of Basingstoke? And can we commit, can we genuinely commit to the 40% that should be? We say to anyone that wants to work with us that our bottom line is 40%. So too the infrastructure needs of the surrounding communities. So too the desire for this council to remain in control. This is not about making shed loads of money for private companies or the interests the Tories favour. If we cannot commit to this on publicly owned land, how in the world do we expect private developers to commit to it on their land? It's a fundamental question. The Garden City status comes with money for investing in infrastructure needs. Even the government have made a commitment to affordable housing, commendable as that is, the extent that it goes, the 200,000 houses that they claim they're going to build, as much as we are saying it as the opposition. What matters is that there is no justifiable reason not to commit, unless the administration don't plan to deliver 40%, unless that really is what's behind this all along. We're not just talking about 3,500 homes anymore either, not with the studies underway to justify a further 750. And the administration are even now, in the bid for that very £850,000 from government, talking about 10,000 new homes over the next 2 local plan periods to the west of Basingstoke. 10,000 homes to the west of Basingstoke. Who are we building all these homes for? Who will benefit from the huge monies being generated? Who have the Tories got lined up in the wings on this? Mr Mayor, this council voted for the motion in support of 40%. Now this council seeks to affirm its policy position. That is the position that was voted on in this chamber before. It is our existing stance. This meeting tonight seeks to tell the MEC, those 3 rural Tory cabinet members, that that's what council's will is. Please support this tonight. Show the commitment to the affordable housing that we need in this town, on our land. Show the commitment to those residents who sold their council houses, who voted in that referendum, who agreed to do that, who put their faith in a council that would use the resources to build affordable housing for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Potter, do you want to speak now?
I will, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and if I restate some of the points Councillor Harvey's made, then so be it. But yes, I'm formally seconding the motion. I live in hope, probably naively, that there are members opposite with a real conscience who will come with us this evening and support the motion, as they know it deserves support. I remain of the view that Council has a primacy on this matter, but I recognise that should this be supported this evening and referred to the Manidan Executive Committee, it will probably be treated with the same disdain as the original motion was. The MEC said that the proposal to commit to 40% affordable housing at this stage was premature and not implementable. That is only the case if they subjectively say this is the case, and I dispute this. None of the MEC, in my view, has the history or the emotional commitment to this project that many of us do within this chamber, but most importantly, not to make this absolute pre-commitment to 40% affordable housing on Manidan at this stage is a betrayal of the people of Basingstoke who signed up to the original agreement 20 years ago. Do we really conceive of a situation where Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, as a landowner, may submit a planning application confirming something other than 40% affordable housing on the development? I, for one, know how I would expect the planning authority to respond to this. Manidan has represented a shameful period in the history of this council, and it will remain so if we don't make the commitment we are seeking in this motion. The residents of Winklebury were lied to purely for political gain, and this council, to its shame and cost, had to be dragged through the courts for the commitment made 20 years ago to be enforced. The portfolio holder states that the project cannot be funded by this council alone. That itself is debatable, as council-led models exist elsewhere. But with external investors involved, we know where the pressure comes to maximise returns at the expense of the social need of affordable rented housing. This is a massive cash-producing project with loads of outside interests who can't wait to get their hands on the returns. And no, I don't find it difficult to use the word profit, but profit for who is the question. We are talking about billions, not millions of pounds involved here. Up to 50 external consultants are identified to be given work over the next 2 years. They will get hundreds of thousands of pounds out of this project, and many of them, as we know, have links with each other, so you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours applies. Garden City status has been granted to the project, and upfront money for infrastructure is on the way. A joint venture company made up of this council and Hampshire County Council with others is to be formed, together with a Manidan Company Limited not involving trustees, whatever that may be. The scale and investment in providing these 8,000, possibly or probably 10,000 houses is mind-boggling. Sadly, last on the list of priorities for the project is to build some affordable units for people in Basingstoke who desperately need something better than the provision made by private developers under planning approvals. We owe it to them to give them this absolute commitment tonight. Please redirect the decision makers on this issue and don't be told what to do by those who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. I say again, those of you who know this is the right thing to do, please come with us and support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Westbrook, you were the first hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start with the fact that we all seem to have one thing in common, and we want Manidan to be an exceptional development. And I'm sure that we all have the desire and commitment to make Basingstoke a productive and prosperous town for all. But we appear to have differing views on what is exceptional. With the projected growth in jobs for Basingstoke, one of the things we have to ensure is that we're able to keep the workforce living within our area. So the current situation is that we need to build more homes suitable for everyone. Many residents, because of the lack of homes, are forced into the expensive private rental market. Flats in my ward have seen rents increase from £800 a month to £1,000 a month in the last 3 years, an increase of 25%. This is not sustainable as wages are not keeping up with this sort of rise. We can see this played out in the increasing housing benefit bill. As of the 31st of January this year, we had approximately 1,600 private tenants claiming housing benefit, of which 1,300 are in work, some 81%, and a staggering £1 million per month being paid to private landlords. We also have a lot of young adults who are not able to afford to move out of the family home. And I've spoken to many parents whose sons and daughters and their families are actually now moving back in and compounding an already significant problem we have with parking. In addition, we have residents who are having to move out of the area because of the lack of affordable homes and rising prices. A young couple in my ward recently sold a 2-bedroom apartment. They had 6 viewings on the first day, with 3 firm offers from investors and a first-time buyer. Regrettably, the agent advised them to sell to an investor. An agent offering this sort of advice to a seller is a worrying trend and something that will continue as long as there is an unaffordable housing shortage. So there's the problem. House prices in Basingstoke have risen as much as 25% since 2011, only 10% less than some London boroughs. Basingstoke, being only 40 minutes from London, is in danger of becoming another rich man's playground. In the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, they have a thing called a Home Start scheme. What is a Home Start scheme, you may ask? Well, the Home Start scheme actually encourages people to move from social housing within London to privately rented accommodation outside of London. Is this the vision we have for our residents in Basingstoke? Perhaps creating our own Home Start scheme where we shift residents out because we don't have enough affordable homes? What next? Perhaps a Basingstoke equivalent of London's Garden Bridge spanning the River Loddon. Visitors only and with limited access for local residents. The London Garden Bridge, of course, is another vanity project from the Mayor of London. Mind you, Tory vanity projects and bridges are synonymous with each other. If you ask my residents whether they prefer the council make a profit or build affordable homes for their families, I know what the answer would be. Achieving 40% of affordable homes has a much wider benefit to the community than one might imagine. One council is building its own affordable homes, but they're giving current social tenants in the area first refusal on shared ownership properties for a limited period, before extending the sale to the rest of the residents in the borough. This has the added advantage of freeing up existing social housing and giving other residents the opportunity for rents at affordable prices. I think I've highlighted the case for why, as a landowner, this council must reaffirm its commitment to 40% affordable housing on Manydown. We shouldn't be dictated to by developers. If a developer doesn't want to work with us on this commitment, then we should be looking for partners that will. As a council and as landowners, we're in the driving seat. Other authorities who are also landowners are already making a commitment to 40% affordable homes. For example, Oxford City Council, who with partners are about to create an exemplary residential-led development where people are more important than profit. And if we want local homes for local people, we should be doing the same. What we don't want is for Manydown to become a posh, gated complex with its own golf course. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a very good speech. It was also your maiden speech, so congratulations. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting meeting. It appears that Labour may actually have a housing policy and that Councillor Harvey has a point. And I guess that's why you've called it an extraordinary meeting. I needn't go through my stance on affordable housing as it's well established, and those who really want to support affordable homes will be back in the local plan later on this evening. Mr. Mayor, there's a reality. There are a number of brownfield sites in our local plan that are constrained in terms of what technology can be used, constrained in terms of what development they can take, shape they can take, and what the sites can be used for. And there will be situations where those sites will genuinely not be viable to deliver affordable homes. That's why it's absolutely critical that where we have a share in a site, and it's a greenfield site, 40% is absolutely right, and we shouldn't be negotiating on it. Now tonight, Mr. Mayor, I imagine you'll hear the whole chamber united in its determination to provide 40% affordable housing. But the administration is scared to make it non-negotiable position. They're concerned because they've had legal advice. I should remind members we've had legal advice on Manydown before, and it didn't work out too well. We're told we could face a legal challenge if we support this motion tonight. But who from? Mr. Mayor, a few years ago our local plan included a policy of 40% affordable housing, but it didn't include Manydown as a site. The Manydown company took us to court to get the site included, knowing of the 40% policy. So I think that would make any challenge by them very difficult. The county council, perhaps. They purchased their share of Manydown to meet the housing needs of the borough. We know we need a minimum of 40% affordable. Indeed, they supported Manydown being in the last local plan with the same 40% policy existed. On what basis can they take legal action if we were to affirm our policy tonight? We're also told about prematurity. Developing a site 20 years after we bought it for development is hardly premature. It makes absolute sense to set out our red lines at an early stage of negotiation. Are the Tories saying we can't take a firm view until it's too late? Or are they saying they can't take a firm view until their masters in the county council tell them what their firm view is? Mr Mayor, we need to be clear with our partners and our residents who, let's not forget, purchased the site. We can negotiate on the designs, we can negotiate on the build technologies, we can negotiate on the way we deliver infrastructure to make the scheme viable. What we must not do is negotiate on 40% affordable. I therefore support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Isaac.
Good evening, Mr Mayor. This administration is committed to building new homes and ensuring that Manydown will be a great place to live in. A development that will become acknowledged in the borough and beyond as a model example of how a new community can be created and flourish in the 21st century. And yes, to confirm once again, our policy, in step with our own draft local plan, is to deliver a balanced community of open market and 40% affordable homes. Also, to respond to Councillor Harvey, our priority is that the affordable homes for rent will go to local people by application of this administration's newly enacted and improved housing allocations policy. So what is the point of this motion from the Labour leadership? We both want 40% affordable at Manydown. The difference is that for selfish reasons they believe will bring them short-term political gain, the Labour leadership is seeking to bind this council as landowner to state unequivocally to any existing or potential partners that this commitment is non-negotiable. This can be seen as political posturing at election time and therefore of no real lasting significance, but this is not the case, and councillors need tonight to take account of these implications. The motion seeks to ignore clear legal advice, both from our own legal officers and a barrister, who have confirmed that such an absolute commitment would render the development unviable, could render the development unviable and stop us proceeding with development at all. Are members so certain that this legal advice is incorrect that they wish to take the risk of legal challenges and even another judicial review? Is the reality that members who may vote for this motion are ultimately expecting the MEC to take the decision once more to save this council from another potentially reputation-damaging and costly legal debacle? As portfolio holder, I, for one, am not prepared to put myself in possible jeopardy by approving an action about which the legal advice is unequivocal. The risks to this council are clear and genuine. By seeking to impose a position unilaterally now which will determine the future, the Labour leadership wants us to act in contempt of our partners, Hampshire County Council and the Manydown Company Limited. This council does not own the land outright. We are equal owners of Manydown with HCC, and the Manydown Company is entitled to 50% of development profit. Members should understand what the position of our partners is likely to be were this motion to be implemented. HCC share our vision for Manydown, and we are working well together. In January, the lead HCC officer on the project confirmed in an email that, quote, "The County Council supports the principle of affordable housing and what it seeks to achieve. However, it is the firm view that this should be determined via the local planning and planning application processes. The level and nature of affordable housing on a given site must be based upon the relevant negotiations that occur at the appropriate time between the LPA, landowners and developers, as it is only at that stage that all the relevant context and information will be available. It is not appropriate for either of the Manydown landowners or other interested parties to preempt this and state what level of affordable housing should be prior to the above due process. In addition, based upon the agreement between the Borough Council and County Council as parties with the joint interest in Manidown, it is not appropriate for the Borough Council as landowner to make a unilateral decision on the level of affordable housing as set out in the motion of the report. If this is pursued, it will likely have ramifications for the Manidown project and not least potential financial compensation issues for the Borough Council. Because of the potentially serious consequences of this motion, I felt that it was also important that I should speak today to the chairman of the Manidown Company, Mr. Alexander Dickinson. He advised me that the position of his board is the approach taken over the JR, that Manidown was acquired by the council for the better development of the land, and as a commercial organisation, the Manidown Company should achieve best value for the land. How best that is achieved will be determined by the planning process. Manidown is a complicated development site, and imposing particular requirements limits the ability to deliver the best possible outcome. Councillors can be in no doubt tonight of the potential risks into which they may be putting this council, and for what reason or benefit of any kind. I'm sure that our residents, the voters, will not be impressed by those councillors who decide to continue to play games and vote for this dangerous motion. Instead, as a council, we should pursue 40% affordable, but do so lawfully.
Thank you. Councillor Tilbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's very interesting to hear from Councillor Isaac. Yeah, I would remind him we don't actually own the land. The Manidown Company own the land. We have a lease on it. And the first point I would make is it's still a lease. We don't own it. The first point I would make is it's now 3 years since the High Court judgment, so why are we still unable to state with any certainty that 40% affordable housing is viable? What has been going on for the last 3 years? As a member of the Manidown MAP and the successor of the Overview Committee, I have to say, in my opinion, very little. Compare this with the Basingstoke Town Development Group. Where are we? Who back in the 60s had within 2 years plans in place to treble the size of the old town, which allowed for nearly 15,000 council houses, nearly as many private homes, factory sites and a ring road, all to be completed in 15 years, which they achieved. How times change. We are proposing to build a mere 3,400 houses, which, as someone pointed out in the Gazette today, they're building nearly as many just down the road at Hounsdon Fields and the golf course. We're going to do this in 15 years. However, to achieve this, we're being advised that we need to bring in a business partner which will have our influence and that of Hampshire County Council, as we apparently don't have the money to fund even this low level of development. As for the legal arguments, the first is that it would be unreasonable as we don't know the facts. I know this council involved its former tenants in an equity release scheme dressed up as stock transfer that generated a mountain of cash for the council and an even larger mountain of debt for the tenants. I know we also told them we would spend this amount of cash on providing more affordable housing. And we all know that this is where the money came from to fund both the boroughs and county council's purchase of our joint interest in Manidown. The legal opinion goes on to state it will be premature to commit to 40% affordable housing, as it is only one element that could be delivered as part of the proper planning of the area, quote the section 226 and 227 powers used by Basingstoke and Dean to purchase its interest in the land, as opposed to owning the land. An argument that unhelpfully confuses the legislation that enabled the council to purchase the interest in the land with the clear statements made at the time that the intent was to provide affordable housing. It suggested that if we were to agree this motion, it would seek to limit the council in the future exercise of its powers. This is clearly incorrect, as any decision we make can be undone by any future council. I'm surprised that a legal counsel is apparently unaware of this fact. This is the whole point of this motion. Given what we know at this point in time, we have seen nothing to suggest 40% affordable housing is not viable. That may well change for any number of circumstances outside our control. The council could agree next month to sell its interest in the site, in which case this motion would become completely irrelevant, so it doesn't bind anybody. The problem with any legal opinion is that it's just that, an opinion. I would have hoped by now that those who cling to legal opinion in blind faith would have learnt something from our previous unlawful antics in the High Court. We have also heard arguments regarding the need to obtain best value. Clearly some have forgotten that we have several times in the recent past sold land at less than the market or best value, including at Foxstone in Overton, where we gave the developer £1 million to subsidise the green elements of their housing scheme. I would also make the point that we've already wasted the best part of £1 million to prevent housing from being built on Many Down. So we cannot be that hard up. Well, at least we might get that back from the government now, so that's handy. In the current local plan, not one developer has attempted to argue it isn't viable to provide 40% affordable housing, and even the growing number of appeals have not changed this. To date, the only developer questioning the viability of 40% affordable housing is this council. What a dismal state of affairs. If we do need to bring in outside funding, then I would make the same point I've made before. The best way to ensure that we're able to provide 40% affordable housing on Many Down is either to work with the housing association sector to provide affordable housing,
1 minute.
or even better, build them ourselves. This now makes economic sense, as councils no longer have to hand over their rental profits to central government as they did under the old Housing Revenue Account scheme. And for those Conservatives who still recoil in horror at the very thought of council housing, if it helps, think of it as buy-to-let, where the profit is returned to the council and its taxpayers. Sadly, having listened to the leader at the last meeting and read the views of some of their candidates in the Gazette, it seems we have some way to go before they follow their more enlightened colleagues on Conservative councils such as Winchester, who have restarted building council houses. They've also slightly more enlightened that when they get found out in the High Court, they actually have the decency to resign in Winchester, but never mind. We have repeatedly been told by the Conservatives that we just need to trust them over this. Unfortunately, the more times they repeat this plea, the more suspicious I become. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't know where this motion's going, where it's meant to lead this council in the, and I quote, properly planned, comprehensive development of the area. That's Many Down, by the way, and this is the purpose for which the council still holds the lease. Lease, yes, 999 years is a long time. You could say you own it, but it's been misused, that word, time and time again from some of the members opposite. We don't own it. You own the freehold of your house, but you don't lease it. If you lease it, you lease it. I paraphrase without losing the meaning of a quote from the Judicial Review and Mr. Justice Lindbaum. Nobody in this chamber can argue with the intent in these words. However, I have over the last 3 years heard much of the members opposite saying that we own Many Down, and I repeat that, and we can build what we like, I quote, on 25% of effectively the land that we lease. I question that. Our partners in the enterprise, Hampshire County Council and the Many Down Company Limited, the freeholders, seem conveniently, until very recently, been omitted from the general debate. I don't see them, I haven't seen them on the committees that I attend, and only involved and acknowledged in the specific committees, but the general debate they're not included. Notwithstanding the source of the funding that secured the 999-year lease for comprehensive development, and I quote, comprehensive development, it's not narrow, we are just beginning the very complex process of undertaking the proper planning necessary to deliver the vision of Many Down for Basingstoke, and we've heard that enumerated tonight. I think you will agree that to achieve these aims, the proper expertise, skills and decisions of all the stakeholders of this venture, all the way through, need to exercise prudence and apply the appropriate risk analyses to the project. We haven't got anywhere near that yet. This will apply not only to the provision of the most suitable housing, but also the appropriate infrastructure to support it. There's your risk. This involves many more stakeholders other than the three principals, making the difficulty of executing all these plans over several years much more complex and risky. We are at a very early stage of the planning process, and here we have a motion before us that limits our flexibility in the developments of Many Down. The proposers of this motion are, I suspect, looking for a quick political win, and conveniently forgetting that projects of this magnitude take time, and you need to reduce the risk, and have to be adaptable to changing requirements such as the local, national economy, central government policies and variations within, for instance, the construction industry. We have a policy within our draft local plan that states we have a target of providing 40% affordable housing. To change that policy for Manydown alone here, we're not changing it for anywhere else, just Manydown, is totally unacceptable to me as an elected councillor. And to be arrogant enough to state to our partners that this is non-negotiable is not acceptable, and it shouldn't be acceptable to any elected councillor in this chamber. We intend to stand by the policy CN1 to provide appropriate, affordable housing for our residents on Manydown. I will not support this motion.
Councillor Keith Watts.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I believe this motion does address an executive function within the remit of the Cabinet or the Manydown Executive Committee, and as a result I thought the sole purpose of the motion this evening was to provide a platform for grandstanding for Councillor Dr Harvey before the general election. But at this stage, in a fixed term Parliament, who cares if it's inevitable? Let's all enjoy it, shall we? But I have to say I didn't anticipate it being reduced to absurdity by a clunky question from the public benches. Now, I support the general thrust of the motion. Throughout the 6 years in which we've been working on this current potential local plan, I've consistently voted for a policy requiring 40% affordable housing in residential areas. The Labour councillors never have. I repeat, the Labour members of this council have never voted for a plan providing 40% of affordable homes. Their motion asks the council to reaffirm a policy that they have never supported when they've had the opportunity to do so. Later this evening, they will have another opportunity, either by supporting this submission local plan that's been tabled or proposing a plan of their own. Now, this is very important. The affordable policy is under attack, and it will be at the examination in public by prospective developers and others who don't have the interests of local people at heart. The inspector questioned the viability at an exploratory meeting, and we do need a united front within this council if we're going to avoid the policy being found unsound. This week another appeal decision has gone before us, the allotments in Blusswood Drive in Whitchurch will now be built on. I wasn't the only member to predict that we would have this planning by appeal if we didn't get on and get a local plan. In 2013 I left my bucket and spade in Devon and came here to support Councillor Raffel's motion on a local plan, saying we did need solidarity, and indeed I called it the coalition of the grown-ups. It's time that the Labour councillors join the grown-ups on this council, and we do need a united approach to the planning policy before we can talk about reaffirming it as a landowner. A senior Conservative said at the recent scrutiny committee that the Cabinet could be more helpful, more positive on this issue of Manydown and the 40%, and I concur with that. But as Councillor Isaac said, they have to take their partners along with them, and mostly Hampshire County Council needs to come along. Now, Hampshire County Council policy equals Conservative policy, and this is a good time really to ask senior Conservatives exactly what the Conservative policy is, whatever machinations are going on with the officers. Well, 3 Conservatives are standing for election from this borough. There's Mrs Miller, Mr Malthouse, and someone else. So I shall support this motion, but let's all go out and send a message to everybody who needs an affordable home. Don't vote for anyone who doesn't promise to campaign for 40% affordable homes in Basingstoke and Dean.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Manydown opportunity is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to provide new housing for the borough over the next 20 years or so. And I think that if it has to be developed, it must be developed correctly with sound infrastructure, trying to avoid the pitfalls that we all know that have beset some of the areas of Basingstoke. This administration already has an adopted policy, the Affordable Housing Policy C2, and has a policy in the local plan submission, Policy CN1, both of which are committed to the provision of 40% affordable housing, not just on Manydown, but on all sites across the borough. Therefore, I can see no reasonable need for this spurious resolution. I'm also minded of the legal constraint that the Council should not exclude or limit the future exercise of its powers. And if this resolution is passed, I'm very concerned that this resolution will be encouraging members to act in an unlawful manner, as the resolution is seeking to limit the Council's future exercise of its powers by failing in its statutory duty under Section 123 of the Local Planning Act, where the Council as a landowner, either freehold or leasehold, or for land where the Council has either part interest or does not own the freehold outright, must obtain best consideration. And I do not think that placing a non-negotiable restriction of 40% social housing should necessarily be considered best practice. I know that the Council has sought both internal and external legal advice, both of which say that if this resolution is passed, it could be leaving the Council open to a judicial review. And so, mindful of the cost of the last judicial review, again involving Manydown, I simply cannot support this motion, and I urge other members in this chamber not to support it either.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. That's our second maiden speech of the evening. Councillor Bierman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It saddens me when we keep on having references to this being election campaigning. Now, obviously, everybody's aware of what they might say that might have an influence on their election campaign, but there was nothing more campaigning than the contribution from the public speaker, and he is aligned with those who are complaining most about what the Labour Party is doing. So I have a little difficulty with this inconsistency of thinking. I remember when Councillor Tilbury and myself suggested what was being proposed, i.e. nothing on Manydown might be unlawful, and we were told that we were just posturing and making a nuisance of ourselves and going to cost the Council all sorts of reputational damage. In the end, that happened to be right. And we're no lawyers, and we're still no lawyers, but we can see the good sense of what is being said in this motion. There's frequent reference in the legal advice to things like return on investment and best consideration. Well, yes, that is important, but it is not a crowning consideration. It has been proven in court cases that if the best consideration is of a different type other than financial, it can still stand up. And we're saying here, we're not just looking at the bottom line financially, we're looking at the bottom line for the borough and its residents. And that's why it's possible to look at a way that doesn't necessarily bring in the most cash. And in that line, I would make reference to the Merton rule, or the Merton principle, or whatever it was in those days, where Merton Council decided that they would have a requirement in their local plan that one built houses to a high eco standard. Now, there were those at the time that when that was coming forward to say, oh, it won't be viable, you can't do that, all the developers will run away, terrible. In fact, it finished up with a lot of councils following their advice. And I'm not aware of anybody taking a court case against Merton for putting it in. And indeed, I'd go one stage further. Lots of public expense, I have no shame about it, public expense, have attended quite a few conferences and seminars. And what has been consistently said on those occasions is, if you are the landowner or the leaseholder or have a control of the sale of the land, that is the best opportunity to do sensible development on that land and to take into account the interests of the local authority and its residents. And here we have just that situation, and to take no notice of the fact that we have a special privilege over and above just being the planning authority would be a criminal derogation of our powers and authority. There's under paragraph 11 in the legal advice I quickly read as it was sent out today, where it says there's a wish to advance and that this motion was seeking to stop this advance. I couldn't understand that. It puzzled me, because the last thing that anybody in this room, I suspect, is saying we don't want to move forward. So why, because one wants to move forward in a sensible fashion, is one seeking not to advance? One just wants to advance in the right direction. So, you know, let's not take any notice of that baloney. The public speaker, again, I just come back to the suggestion of a hotbed of political dogma. Well, if that wasn't a speech as opposed to a question, I don't know what is a speech. I mean, anybody can, and a lot of people have done it, myself probably included, have framed things in a question to get a statement forward. But I think the Tory attack on that front was not very fair-minded, and taking into account the leader's statement that this is a very important topic and it's not a topic for playing games with. And I don't like the undercurrent of snobbery that was in the public speaker's statement. It was implying that you weren't going to get good quality development if you had 40% affordable housing. Didn't like it. So I think the key thing in this is we, as a local authority, must be leading by example. And if we're going to ask other developers to provide 40%, but say right from virtually the start, we are not going to demand that, then we are letting down ourselves, because that will be taken advantage of. So I implore everybody, whatever cynicism they might have about any political colleagues over there, vote for this resolution. Thank you.
Councillor Leake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last night at Development Control, Councillor Potter said he was pleased to see that a rural exception site in St Marybourne was to provide 11 dwellings, all of which were to be affordable. That, however, is the purpose of such sites, and many of us representing the rural areas have worked to provide such sites so that those with local connections can remain in our villages. Although rural, Manydown is certainly not an exception site. It is currently a large part of my ward, which is to become what we used to call a major development area. It will provide 3,400 dwellings, and I doubt any of its future residents will have a local connection with Wootton St Lawrence. It is also a site which is unlikely to make an adequate contribution to the infrastructure it demands. We are told there will be no sill payments. The Manydown site development policy hints at the possibility of investigating a western bypass, but I've heard very little in the way of commitment to such a road by either the local authority as planner or by Basingstoke and Hampshire as landowners. In my view, Roman Road will prove inadequate as the only corridor between the A339 and the B3400. And as for the proposed spine road through the Manydown development, that will be spurned by motorists when they find how slow it is as an alternative route. And most of all, I'm concerned greatly about the possibility of rat running through the village of Wootton. I've warned about these issues more times than I care to remember. In 5 years' time, you will find that I was right to do so. A major development area will also require schools, surgeries, community facilities, open spaces, including, in this case, the country park to the northwest, shops in attractive settings, and many other features. I hope it will also be built to very high standards, because, as I understand it, that was one of the reasons for Basingstoke and Hampshire acquiring the site. And high standards are an important issue in my ward. I understand fully the need for affordable housing, but in my view it is only one of the many issues we need to consider on this site, which is almost adjacent to the wonderful North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. 10 years ago, we all agreed that we should not build more houses until we had the infrastructure. Nothing has changed in my view. The Manydown development is extremely important, and it needs to be an example of excellent planning with provision for all sensible and appropriate needs for the community which will live there. We may not achieve this if the provision of 40% affordable housing makes the development unviable. Whilst I hope we can achieve that target, I'm not prepared to jeopardize the other requirements, and I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's broadly 3 points that I'd like to make to Council this evening. We have legal advice that really asks us to consider the reasonableness of the decisions that we take, and quotes the case of the Wednesbury Corporation back from 1948, and which is about a level of unreasonableness that might leave a decision liable to be quashed by judicial review. Now, since Wednesbury, this was also further articulated by Lord Diplock as so outrageous in its defiance of logic or accepted moral standards that no sensible person who had applied his mind to the question to be decided could have arrived at it. So I ask myself, to have a local plan policy of 40% affordable housing, but not to commit to it on land over which we have some control, is that outrageous and unreasonableness? Well, no, it certainly is not. I'm one of the few of us who were in this chamber back in 1996 when the land with the lease was bought. And back then, did we expect to make profit from Manydown? We bought it for the proper planning of the area. Yes, we did hope that there would be some profit from the development that we could then plough back into our local communities. But back then, in 1996, did we think that that profit might come at the expense of affordable housing on that land? Absolutely not. Not in any way whatsoever. There's been a suggestion that some councillors are playing games over Manydown. Well, any games that have been played over Manydown started in 2006 by taking irrational and illegal decisions, not by those of us this evening who are arguing for a commitment to 40% affordable housing. We want this development to go ahead. We need this development. We want it to be good, to be an exemplar of how a modern major development can be created as a wonderful place to live. And that means we must have 40% affordable housing on that development. So I shall certainly support this motion and encourage Council to do so.
Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 9th of February, at the Manydown Overview Committee, we were presented with a motion for further consideration from the full council meeting of the 11th of December. We discussed at great length the implications of adopting, endorsing such a motion. My position has not changed, but for the benefit of all councillors, I will reinforce this evening why this is the case. We have before us this evening a motion that both internal and external advice has suggested could be unlawful. The legal advice clearly states, and I quote for the benefit of any members who may not have had the time to read the advice, that at this time officers simply cannot inform the MEC about the effect of adopting the motion. It also goes on to further say that the MEC may not lawfully adopt the motion, and goes on to further recommend that the motion is simply rejected. With very clear legal advice in front of me, I was not happy to support a motion that would mean the portfolio holder and the MEC may be put in a position that is considered to be unlawful. I am still not happy to do this. In the meeting of the 9th of February, we had some members of this council suggesting that we should simply ignore the advice and that they couldn't see where any challenge could come from. Are they not aware that we are not the only owner of this land? It was suggested that we didn't need all the detailed information as suggested by council officers in the meeting to make an informed decision. It was as though they were suggesting they knew better than council and officers. Clearly I am not a legal expert, but neither are they. I have to trust the advice before me and act accordingly on behalf of my residents. We all have a duty to act rationally. It would be irrational to support a motion that isn't based on any evidence of being deliverable or lawful. We have been taken to court once before. I am not happy to risk this happening again. It seems as though some members may have forgotten this. We as an administration have been absolutely... Thank you. We as an administration have been absolutely consistent and clear on affordable housing, and I will repeat again this evening, as I and many others have done before. We are committed to 40% affordable housing as set out in the policy CM1 of the draft local plan. Many Down has the opportunity to be an exemplar development and provide a sustainable housing mix which provides homes that people wish to live in. We need homes for first-time buyers, young people who have worked hard, saved and aspire to own their own home. We need larger homes for families so people can raise their children in our town. But clearly we have a social responsibility to provide homes for those in genuine need. Many Down is able to deliver this, but not if this motion is passed, which would mean we are entering into negotiations with our hands tied behind our backs. Finally, I think it is also important to remember that this investment was made using our taxpayers' money for the proper planning of the area. It is not unreasonable to expect the benefits of this development to be enjoyed by all residents of the borough, not just a few. When we are told that it would be premature and Wednesbury unreasonable to make a commitment of this kind, and this could potentially render the site unviable and potentially delay the implementation of the project, I am left feeling that this is a carefully crafted, politically motivated motion that I will not be supporting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We've time for two more speakers before I pass to Councillor Harvey to sum up. The first of which will be Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You won't be surprised that we've been out campaigning in Winklebury recently, walking the streets, meeting lots of residents in Winklebury, knocking on the doors, and some of those residents are very anxious about the development of Manydown and have lots of concerns. And in talking to them, they also raise with us the needs of their families, their grandchildren and their own housing needs. And when we actually start to talk about Manydown and what is actually proposed on Manydown, and that this administration is saying quite clearly as landowner that they won't commit to 40% of affordable housing on Manydown, they're appalled. I mean, I don't know whether this administration knows or not, but there's 792 residents in Winklebury on the register, on the housing register. Many of those people that are on the register are grandchildren of those people that actually took part in the vote on the LSVT all those years ago, and they're in need of a house. Now, you made a commitment, or we made a commitment back then as a council, that we would deliver affordable housing, low-cost housing for those people in housing need. And clearly, if we don't make that commitment tonight, we are breaking that contract with those people. And those residents of Winklebury, 792 of them, who need a house, and you can laugh and you can smile, Mr. Miller, Councillor Miller, but that's the case, that's what they want, and they need a home. What are we going to do? Well, how are we going to house those people? Now, we've had discussion tonight and we've had some comments, why hasn't the Labour Party supported the local plan in relation to the delivery of 40% affordable housing? Well, in the local plan, there is also a policy that talks about viability, and it is basically a get out of jail, and consistently throughout the committee meetings, we had concerns as a Labour group about that policy and how it was worded, and it enables developers to get out of development. And we, as a landowner, are very clear that we want to get out of development. Now, I want to talk about Sentinel Housing Association and the development of the Eli Lilly site. And in that Eli Lilly site, it's a brownfield development. In any brownfield development, it's really much more expensive to deliver affordable housing on than it is on a greenfield. And we held Sentinel to our 40%, and they were saying they were going to struggle to deliver that on that site. But we were absolutely definite that this is what you had to deliver. Now, I think in relation to our credibility with other developers out there, if we say that we're not prepared to commit to that, and as Councillor Tilbury has said, that can change, but what we're saying here tonight is we are committed as a landowner to develop 40% affordable housing on Manydown. And we don't want to be talking about viability, because viability is just going to give us that out. And we have been very clear with other developers, why is it okay for us as landowners to get out of delivering our commitment to 40%? And I think it's really important that we think about those people in Winklebury and throughout the rest of the town on where are we going to house them? Where are they going to live? It is so expensive for people to live in this town.
1 minute.
Rented accommodation is expensive, and people are struggling to find accommodation. And what we are saying on this side of the chamber, we're saying, who are we building all these houses for? If it is not for those people in Winklebury, if we are not building it for those 792 people, who are we building it for? And if we look at the money that we got from government, it's very clear that that money came for the delivery of 10,000 units of accommodation to the west of Basingstoke. Now, if we're going to have 10,000 units to the west of Basingstoke and they are not going to have 40% of affordable housing on, who is going to be living in there? Who are we housing? It is so important that we as a council say very clearly that we want to commit to house local people who have housing needs. We made that commitment those years, many years ago, that we would actually use the money to build low-cost housing.
And the last speaker before Councillor Harvey, last but by no means least, Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to allay some fears from the administration where they talk about the legal advice, and from their sounding they feel the legal advice is binding. But advice is exactly that. It is advice. It is an opinion. It is not a judgment. You can take that advice, you can look at it, you can interpret it and give your own opinion. Now, we've gone through it and we have a different opinion. And funny enough, in the report to the Manydown Executive Committee of 13th of February, 2.1, bullet point 3, legal advice is only an opinion and not a judgment. So that's why we have brought this motion forward. No one can deny, Mr. Mayor, that we need affordable homes. Having a list of 6,000 people is a key indicator of that. And even by throwing people off the list, which is what the administration are doing, that doesn't tackle the issue. We need homes and we need affordable homes. Now, you're probably asking yourselves, how many affordable homes did we build in 2014-15? Was it in its hundreds? No. We built 33. 33 homes! That's appalling! We should be ashamed of ourselves. That's completely outrageous. Why? Why do we only build 33? We should be building much, much more affordable homes. And I want to refer something back, Mr. Mayor, to something that the leader said last full council, when he said something about not wanting to see rows and rows of council houses. Now, I bought my first home at a development in my ward called Sinclair Drive. Sinclair Drive was developed on a 40% basis affordable home structure. And let me tell you, Mr. Mayor, it works beautifully. Everybody knows the position. Everybody knows that you have private accommodation, you have private people living, and you have social housing as well. and everybody gets on fine. There's no animosity, there's no anger, there's no judgment, there's no sneering. Everybody gets on as a community. It is an absolutely fantastic place to live. Mr. Mayor, that Sinclair Drive is an example of an extraordinary example of 40% housing. Let's support this motion and let's revive the absolute successes of Sinclair Drive. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harvey, can you sum up, please?
Here we go, press it down hard. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, sometimes the debate in this chamber can be raucous, we can have a good go at each other. Sometimes we can agree about the main points and disagree about points of detail. What really strikes me, and actually I thought I was going to get accused of being a broken record on this, because I've been at this debate for nearly 12 years, for as long as I've been on the council. I remember it in the very first year I was on here. I remember it when I served in the Cabinet. I remember it when we were putting Manydown forward in the old local plan. I remember, as the council leader, having to stand in front of Manydown and work out the reasons why it got taken out. This debate's been going on and on and on and on in this chamber, in this town, for so long. And why? Why do we see such controversy in all of this? The reality was that the commitment was given to those residents that actually put a cross on a piece of paper, in a ballot paper, to vote to sell their council houses. The then Tory council leader made them a promise. You vote to sell your houses, we will use the money to build more affordable housing, low-cost housing. It was written into the agreement, and I know I've seen it because Councillor Tilbury has shared the original document with me, and I imagine he's got it with him tonight. That was a reason that was given, a commitment by this council that we should honour, that we have a duty to honour. In a modern context, yes. In the sense of saying, with that amount of land, with those partners, and I just can't believe that the county council wouldn't commit to 40% affordable housing. I mean, come on. Hampshire County Council is genuinely saying, hang on a minute guys, we want to make the profit out of this rather than do our public duty and deliver 40% affordable housing. Come on. That is disgraceful if that is genuinely their position, but I don't believe it is. I'd be shocked if it was, that a public authority like Hampshire County Council won't commit to one of the largest developments in its area at 40%. That would be shocking, wouldn't it? And we heard from the Manydown trustees when they stood in this chamber, when they were telling us, develop the land. And we heard the siren voices from across the other side of the chamber, Mr. Mayor. Oh, we can't do it because it's not in the local plan, it's not there. And that was the same legal people who have given us advice on this. Yet they got took to court, their legal advice was shown up to be wanting, and the judicial review came back saying what it said. For good planning of the area and low-cost housing. That was what Judge Lindblom came back with. So why do we continue to have this debate in this controversial way, when the reality is what we're saying is, as a public authority, as a council, as the authority responsible for the whole population of our borough, we should be delivering 40% affordable housing on the land we control, in part, influence, shape, form, however you want to do it, what we're paying for in all that work that's being done, all those technical studies that we're paying for, that the taxpayer is actually paying for, and has paid for years, because if you think about the amount of work that has actually gone on Manydown over 20 years, the amount of actual effort that's gone in to get us just to this point, and we still can't commit to 40% affordable housing. Well, goodness me, what a statement of us in this chamber. What a real statement of what we're about. So I guess that's where I finish on this debate. What are we actually about in this room? Do we genuinely care about the people that can't afford their own homes in this town? Do we genuinely care about people who need social housing? Do we care about people that need rented accommodation? Do we care about those that would love to buy their own home, that would love to move, downsize, move through the housing market as it stands, from start right the way through, to not just to downsize the other way as well, from retirement into smaller homes? What we need is a sensible policy, a reasonable policy. And Mr. Mayor,
1 minute.
that is what we're calling for. There is no good reason, no real reason, after all these years, that we cannot commit to 40% affordable housing. And shame on us if we truly walk away from that in this room this evening.
And I'll save Councillor Keating the trouble of standing up, and I will ask for a recorded vote on this. Ooh, if we have a vote, which we will. So we'll move to the vote. Councillors, the Acting Chief Executive just wishes to clarify on that opinion of the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to confirm that in leaving the room at the last cabinet meeting, the members of the Manydown Executive Committee were following the Manydown Land Protocol, insomuch as that says that the Manydown Executive Committee and its members, other than as ordinary members of full council, shall have no direct involvement of the functions and decisions of the council in its capacity as local planning authority, insofar as such functions and decisions relate to the Manydown land. It also says that other as ordinary members of full council, the leader of the council and the portfolio holder for planning shall have no direct involvement in landholding matters relating to the Manydown land. So that is why those members left the room on that occasion. Thank you.
We can now continue with the vote. Right, the vote is closed. Right. You bastards. And anybody else who uses that term will be disciplined. I am totally in favour of the policy that this council has of 40% affordable housing on its developments. And any planning application that goes before this council will have to comply with policy. However, I am mindful of the legal advice. It is advice, but I am minded to accept that advice. Therefore, my vote is against. We now have a few minutes before we resume with the full council meeting at 8.